Thank you, Frank. It's a pleasure to be here. Coming in, I told Frank that I was planning to be very depressing, but after hearing the congressman, I think I'm the ray of sunshine that comes after. I'm going to refocus your attention on Middle East policy and on Iran and on Israel. Let me start with the story of the shuk. You know the story of the shuk. You go to buy a rug, you see a rug, you start to make the deal. If you want the rug more than the guy wants the deal, you're going to overpay. If you want the rug less than he wants the deal, you get a bargain. There's another way to look at the shuk, however, and that is that if you go to the shuk to buy a rug and he wants to sell you a camel, no amount of bargaining and no amount of good faith will bring you a deal unless you change your mind and agree to accept a camel. That's the prism through which I think you should look at the Iran deal and look at Israel's reaction to the Iran deal. The P5+1 thought it was buying a rug. They were trying to stop Iran's enrichment program. That was the goal. Iran, however, was selling a camel. Iran's goal was to find a mechanism by which it could keep the enrichment program, keep its nuclear program, keep its weapons program with the acquiescence of the West. They were doing this. At some point, the Obama administration decided to buy the Iranian camel. They switched sides. They decided it would be okay for Iran to keep its program. So you know the outlines of the deal. Everybody reads the newspaper. The Iranians get billions of dollars. They get centrifuges. They get no inspections at Parchin. They get all kinds of things and a tacit American agreement to keep up their enrichment program. And the West got essentially nothing. No centrifuges dismantled, you know, whatever. You know the parameters. But what Iran really got, even more importantly than any of the specific benefits, Iran got a change in status. Iran went from being a pariah to being a partner in the negotiations with the West. That's what happened to Syria as well. When the Obama administration accepted the Russian plan for a conversation about Syrian nuclear chemical weapons that included Bashar Assad, Assad went from being the guy who was committing war crimes, who needed to step down, who'd lost his legitimacy, to a partner in negotiations with the West. In the case of Iran, the United States set aside terrorism, they set aside proliferation, they set aside all kinds of issues to get to the place where they could find an agreement with Iran. What they said was that this is a very narrow deal. What the administration said was, a very narrow deal, only about nuclear capabilities. We're going to have more deals. We're going to bring this thing down a pike, and we're going to, at some point, come to a happy conclusion. This is not true. And one of the things that worries Israel is the places in which you see that it is not true. Prior to this negotiation that was supposed to be only about nuclear issues, the United States did something very strange. We released 3 Iranian prisoners in the United States. If you remember, in 2009, 3 American hikers were arrested by the Iranian government, Sarah Shore, Josh Fatal, and Shane Bauer. She was released in 2010. The end of 2011 or thereabouts, the 2 guys were released. Starting in early 2012, the U.S. government began to release 3 Iranians. They were not hikers. They were not college kids. They were Shahrzad Gholikhan, excuse me if I get the name wrong, who was convicted on 3 counts of weapons trafficking, Nosratollah Tajik, who attempted to buy night vision goggles from a U.S. agent, and Amir Hossein Sarafi, who was convicted of trying to purchase vacuum pumps that have nuclear applicability. So we traded 3 people who are clearly related to the Iranian military, if not to the Iranian nuclear program, for 3 American hikers. Okay, you could say, all right, we really wanted the American kids home. Okay, fine. But none of that accounts for the 4th Iranian. The 3rd Iranian was released in January of 2013. The secret talks started in March of 2013. In April, we released Mojtaba Atarodi. Atarodi is an Iranian nuclear scientist. What he was doing in the United States is unclear to me, to begin with. But Atarodi was in federal prison for having attempted to purchase nuclear-related equipment and have it shipped out of the country to Iran. So usually those things that they try to buy are crytrons or oscilloscopes or high-speed camera, you know, those kinds of things that really don't have much applicability outside the nuclear program. We released Atarodi without raising the names of former retired FBI agent Levinson, former Marine Hekmati, or Pastor Saeed Abedini. The Iranians were holding 3 more. We let Ataroti go without raising the 3 Americans. And the State Department, when asked specifically about Levinson, Hekmati, and Ataroti, said, no, we didn't raise them in Geneva. We didn't want to raise them in Geneva because Geneva was about nuclear only. Ataroti was about nuclear also. So at this point, you start to understand that the United States was pursuing the camel, and that the deal that was going to come out of this was going to be a very lopsided deal, not in our favor. That's what worries Israel. The unbalanced nature of deals, number one. And number two, the idea that the United States is negotiating on the opposite side from you. Go back to Israel and Israel's camel. The Israelis, since 1948, have been trying to obtain legitimacy in the Middle East from the Arab countries that do not wish to give it to Israel. And the United States has always been on Israel's side in that quest. UN Resolution 242 promises Israel secure and recognized boundaries, free from threats or acts of force. The United States, whether it was with the Arab states or with the Palestinians, has always taken the side that says Israel is entitled to legitimacy and security. The Palestinians were not negotiating for that, however. Palestinians are negotiating for the establishment of a Palestinian state without having to recognize the legitimacy of Israel. So they were doing this. The rug is here, the camel is here. The United States has switched sides again. The United States has now decided that the establishment of Palestine needs to happen whether or not there is a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians that serves the security and the legitimacy of Israeli interests. And you can see that by the plan that General Allen brought with him when he came with Secretary Kerry to Israel. General Allen brought a plan trying to address Israel's security issues. What issues? First, he said, you have to keep military forces along the Jordan River in any Israeli-Palestinian peace deal. You have to have an Israeli presence at the Jordan River border crossings. You have to have Israeli control of the airspace over the West Bank, and you need the stationing of Israeli early warning stations in the West Bank. Those things are required to keep Israel safe. And these, by the way, General Allen suggested, should come with additional American security guarantees and additional money for the IDF. So the problem that you see here is an admission by the United States that any deal between Israel and the Palestinians will not be a peace deal at all. It will be a deal that establishes a state of Palestine that is born in a state of war with Israel. Because if it wasn't, you wouldn't need all these things. If it was a peace deal, it would reduce the need for military forces. It would reduce the need for American security guarantees. So the United States is accepting essentially a long-term truce between Israel and the Palestinians, which is kind of what they're accepting with Iran. The problem with a long-term truce, however, as the Iranian program will show you, and as Ho Chi Minh showed you, as regards the independence of South Vietnam, which they signed on to in the Paris Peace Accords, a long-term truce is only as good as the most aggressive partner wants it to be. When the most aggressive partner is tired of the truce is over. So when you start by saying to Israel, we are no longer negotiating secure and recognized boundaries free from threats or acts of force, those are really important words. Those are the words of UN Resolution 242. Israel hangs its hat on those words. Secure and recognized boundaries free from threats or acts of force. That's not what we're talking about anymore. We're talking about how to birth Palestine, even if Palestine comes out in a state of war with Israel. The second problem is actually in the proposal that General Allen made. It is a mechanism, of course, for Israel to have security without peace. He is a very good soldier. He is an honorable soldier. He knows how to create a security infrastructure and a security architecture. And I think he did a pretty good job on the parameters of that security architecture. However, he is not a politician and shouldn't be expected to be one. All of those things that he put forward as requirements for Israeli security are already there. They're already run by Israel. Why not leave them in the hands of Israel? Israel already is on the Jordan River. Israel already is on the border crossings. Israel already does the overflights. Why not leave all of it in the hands of the IDF, where it's been for the last 65 years? The reason you can't leave it in the hands of the IDF, the reason you need American security guarantees for the West Bank is because without them, you will not have Palestine. The Israelis will not let Palestine emerge as an enemy. If it emerges at all, it has to emerge as a country that is at least a quiescent neighbor. It cannot emerge in a state of war with Israel. So now you have the United States and Israel functionally looking at two different things. The Israelis are still looking for a way to make a peace deal with the Palestinians that would provide security inside the deal. Right? The deal itself has to make you more secure. And you have the Americans arguing, no, we'll make you more secure from the outside, and you give them Palestine anyway. So if you look at what Israel worries about, this is what Frank asked me to do, is look at what Israel's worried about. Israel is worried about finding itself on the opposite side of its primary patron. You know, up until Thanksgiving, I would have said that the Israeli strategic picture was actually quite good. Despite the fact that the region is in flames, the Israeli security picture was really pretty good. Last year's Operation Pillar of Fire had kept the lid on Hamas in Gaza. Security relations with Egypt are very good. Actually, they weren't that bad under Morsi either, but they're very good with the Sisi government, which helps them with Hamas in Gaza and also helps them with security in the northern Sinai, also helps them with the border fence, by the way. As to the congressman's point about open borders and security, the Israelis have established a border fence. They had, for the first time in about 2 years, zero illegal immigration into Israel in the last 2 months. Zero. Nobody got through the fence. Their relations with Jordan are very good. The Syrian civil war was manageable from the Israeli point of view. Neither the Assad government nor the rebels wanted to bait Israel into coming into the war on one side or the other. So the Israelis were set back pretty much from that problem. They established some red lines. They keep those red lines. Everybody understands that they'll keep those red lines. Iran's treasury was being drained to fund the Syrian civil war. That was a good thing from Israel's point of view. Hezbollah being tied down in Syria meant that Hezbollah was unlikely to open a southern front and pick a problem with Israel. So all of those things were fine. The Israelis felt pretty good because on the two crucial issues, Iran and the Palestinians, they believed that they and the Americans were on the same page. I'll suggest to you right now they are not on the same page on either of those issues. And one last thing, one other indicator from the Israeli point of view that things are bad now and likely to get worse. Beginning several months ago when John Kerry was in Israel, he met with Shimon Peres and he made a public statement afterwards in which he said he believed you could make peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but that peace didn't seem to be uppermost in Israel's mind because Israel is a wealthy country and a democratic country and a secure country. And so therefore it seemed to Secretary Kerry that if you are wealthy, democratic, and secure, you don't care that much about peace. Now, I would say that's sort of backwards. I don't know if he thought that Israel would actually be more willing to jump to the American snapping of fingers if they were poor and scared and miserable. But he also did, in a second speech, suggest that the United States could make Israel less secure and could make Israel less prosperous. He said there might be a third intifada. He said there might be a change in relations with Europe. Europe is Israel's largest trading partner, not the United States, but the European countries. So he suggested to Israel that if they didn't hurry up and make peace, Israel could become less secure, and Israel could become poorer. So that's like sticking it in there. 2 weeks ago, Tom Friedman wrote that members of Congress actually do not look at issues of American national security, particularly Iran. They wait for their orders from the Israeli government and from American Jews who pay for their campaigns. That is blatant anti-Semitism. It's also Tom Friedman, so, okay, put it over there. Until this morning. Did you read your Washington Post this morning? Page A12 of the Washington Post. I have to read this. There's no other way to do it. Kerry wants Netanyahu to back off his impassioned public opposition to give the United States time to strike a bargain with Iran. The United States wants Netanyahu to signal to pro-Israel lawmakers in Congress that he is willing to give talks a chance. This may be unrealistic, however, because the congressional drive for more sanctions on Iran could strengthen Israel's hand in demanding a stronger deal. Netanyahu also does not have control over powerful pro-Israel activists in the United States who sometimes take a harder line than the Israeli government on security matters. Yes, Dan, I understand that, yeah. And they're all in this room, which is the only reason that I would read that paragraph, because I know I'm among friends. Otherwise, I think you should burn all the copies of the Washington Post you can find today, because the government of the United States is putting out the word that the Congress of the United States is not responsive to American national security interests. It is responsive to Jews. That is anti-Semitism of the highest order. And that did not come from the mind of the reporter. That came from the people the reporter talks to. They are with Kerry in Israel. So I'm probably never going to repeat that paragraph anywhere else, but I'll say it here because you're here and I'm here. But the Washington Post has now joined John Kerry and Tom Friedman in saying that Jews control the Congress of the United States. I think it's disgusting. Okay? So now I'm back where I was when I started, which is really depressed. Because not only do we find Israel and the United States not together on two of the crucial security issues for Israel and for the United States. Anybody who says, as John Kerry said today, Israel's security is at the top of the list of things that are important when we negotiate with Iran. No, no, no. He should be saying American national security is at the top of the Secretary of State's agenda when he negotiates with Iran. Not Israel. But not only do we not have Israel and the United States together on that issue, we do not have Israel and the United States together on the Palestinian issue. Israel was probably saved by the Palestinians yet again, who rejected General Allen's plan for security in the West Bank. But I came depressed. I was more depressed by Congressman Bridenstine, and I think I probably depressed you all now as well. So thank you. Very nice to have been here.
Well, as I said to you when we came in together, Shoshana, this is not a lunch that we host for good times. We're very grateful to you for, unfortunately, an all too accurate rendering of the challenges that both the United States and Israel are facing, and sadly, I think you're right in your conclusion that they're likely to get worse. There's so much to talk about, and we are late, but I will invite those of you who are running the Congress now to speak up. Dan, go ahead.
Actually, nothing could be further from the truth, if only it were true.
If only from her lips to God's ears, right?
Yeah, right.
The question is one I really don't know the answer to, which is
a first for you, I think.
That's it. And I respect you so much.
You're never supposed to ask a question you don't know the answer to.
The question is, why has Kerry been so foolish as to proceed publicly on two open disagreements with Netanyahu when his reaction to either one strengthens Netanyahu's position to not do what Kerry wants on the other? And I just don't really get that, even if I agreed with Kerry, which I don't. I don't really get why the United States is publicly picking these two different fights, the thing about Allen and the thing about Iran, and allowing Netanyahu to, I guess he's going to be strengthened in his ability to say no.
He is strengthened. You're right. On the Iran thing, the Israeli public was very happy to have him speak publicly and to uphold the interests of the State of Israel as he saw the interests of the State of Israel. I think the same will be true on the Palestinian thing. If you notice, the Washington Post quotes Ehud Olmert a lot as Bibi's functional critic. You know, if they can't do better than Ehud Olmert, then there is no criticism of Bibi that matters in Israel. Why does he do it? I really think that here in Washington, aside from the kind of normal suspension of disbelief when it comes to Middle East issues, believing that we all are brothers under the skin, believing we all can do, you know, that they all want what we want. The president, by the way, said that at the United Nations. He talked about Iran's nuclear program as a manifestation of Iran's belief that we wanted to overthrow their government as a reaction to American mistakes in the region. So then he said to tell the people of Iran, we do not wish to overthrow you. We do not wish to have regime change. We respect you. And all we have to do is solve this nuclear issue, and we can have very good relations. The problem is, yet again, the Iranians do not see the nuclear program as an issue to be solved. They see it as part of their national program going forward to meet national aims. So I think there is just a certain suspension of disbelief in Washington. And Secretary Kerry has been working very, very hard with Martin Indyk, who apparently has assembled some major team of players here in Washington to work out the parameters of the deal without Palestinians and without Israelis to get in the way. They put it here in Washington so that there won't be any voices of realism on either side. And they're spinning themselves.
Could I just add that it seems to me one other explanation, which is not a happy conclusion to come to, but I think at least has to be considered, is Kerry is seeking to foment exactly the kind of damage that he's warning might come, encouraging the Europeans, encouraging the Palestinians, and otherwise a self-fulfilling prophecy. Again, unfortunately, this comes from my own feeling that, as Admiral Lyons so nicely put it, we're dealing with a wrecking operation here.
Frank, I don't
really across
disagree
the
with
board.
you at all. I don't disagree at all. I think Kerry is fomenting those things, and I think those things that have that nasty little spark of anti-Semitism inside of them are deliberate. At least one person, I've forgotten who it is, has written that the goal here is to, it was Lee Smith in Tablet, wrote that part of the goal of this administration is to separate American Jews from power. That if you can reduce the relationship with Israel, if you can make Israel just another country like, I don't know, Nepal or Belgium or Colombia, Jews are more important than American Nepalese or American Colombians, and that's part of the goal of the administration.
Yeah. And a lot less important than American Muslims.
That
Right?
too.
Thank you. Shoshana, your presentation was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about an odd aftermath of this agreement that was struck with the Iranians on their nuclear program in Geneva, and that is how the Iranians are claiming that the Obama administration has misrepresented what was agreed to. And if you look at the text of the agreement, the Iranians are right. We actually did agree on three occasions in the Geneva Agreement, basically to a right to enrichment.
Right.
The administration is claiming that this will stop work on the Iraq heavy water reactor. That isn't true, and the Iranians have claimed that they will continue to work on this reactor. And,
Right.
and you know that Kerry has said bluntly this did not concede the right to enrichment. And I'm just wondering, how did this happen? What's going on here, and what does this mean for the future of this deal?
It means that the Americans were willing to accept a deal. Everybody's a little bit technically right. Kerry did not use the words right of enrichment anywhere, but the deal in more than one place says enrichment will continue. Enrichment will continue. And the Iranians said, look, if you have a deal that says enrichment will continue and it has the signature of the Americans on it, then the Americans have agreed that we can continue to enrich uranium. So even if they didn't use the words right to enrich, the Iranians said correctly, in my view, that if you agree and you sign the paper, then they get to enrich it. No matter what else you say, they get to enrich uranium. So I think they did it deliberately. I think they've decided the best they can do is manage Iran. They do not wish to stop the program. They wish to kick the can down the road. It will not happen. The war will not happen on President Obama's watch. That's his interest. The Israelis will not do anything about it on his watch, which is part of the reason you get this other thing, you know, yanking at the Israeli chain. I think it's all deliberate. They knew what was in that agreement. They fudged it because they thought the American people wouldn't know what was in it. It's the thing that most amazes me about Obamacare. And it's not my area of expertise and it's not my area of interest, except that I got a cancellation notice. Didn't they think we would notice when 5.7 million people got their insurance canceled? They didn't think we'd notice. I think also with the Iran deal, they put out the points that they wanted to put out. They did not put out the text of the agreement. I guess they thought nobody would put out the text. They put out a press release, that's all. Here's our statement.
Jay Leno said that under the agreement, if the Iranians want the uranium, they can keep it.
Yes. Period. Period. Yeah.
Shoshana, can you, one other issue that has arisen, and I'm not quite clear on what the truth of it is, and that is that there isn't yet actually a deal?
There isn't yet actually a deal. That is correct. There is no deal.
So
What
exactly was signed? An outline of the deal that was the framework for the deal that is to come 6 months from now?
No. We signed a framework that will allow us to decide when the deal goes into effect, because we would sort of like it to go into effect with the new year, kind of, maybe. They're meeting next week. They are hoping to actually sign the 6-month deal before the first of the year. In the meantime, we have already released money. We have already walked back the sanctions. But the deal does not begin until we turn the clock on, or we all turn the clock on. And that may be on the 1st of January. But the kicker in here is not just that the deal hasn't started. This is not a 6-month deal either. This deal says, if you read the deal, this is a renewable deal. So all they have to do in May is decide to renew it for another 6 months because they're not ready to go to the next step. So this is one of those perpetual things that has in it the seeds of a deal that will last a lot longer just because we're not prepared to cut it off. And to preclude a military strike, precisely.
This is why the president is so upset that he moved in the Senate to start on sanctions that would come forward in 6 months.
In 6 months.
He has no intention in 6 months with ending it.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Dan. He does not plan in 6 months to say, we tried, we did our best, but we failed. What he's going to do is roll it over in April or May for another 6 months or whatever he can get away with. Consequently, you do not want sanctions that are timed to start on the 30th of June. That's his problem, and he would like, by the way, the American Jewish community to use all the massive power at its disposal to force our congressman and said not to do this. Good luck to him.
Even as he's demeaning you.
Even as he's demeaning us. You mean you're not one of us, Frank?
Well, I passed.
Sometimes I forget.
I passed for one. Shoshana, just address, if you would, specifically the point that that this deal was pretty much as much about creating an arrangement that would make it even harder for Israel to do something about this problem than it already was. Because it certainly doesn't do anything about stopping the program. It certainly doesn't give us even fig leaves about that. So is that a reasonable conclusion?
Yes, it's a reasonable conclusion, and it follows directly from what happened in Syria. None of these things should be seen in isolation. These are all patterns. The president did not want to go to war in Syria. He did not want to punish the Syrians for their use of chemical weapons. And so he found a mechanism not only not to do it, but to start a process of negotiation. Once the process is on, the theory goes, once the process is on, only the process matters. All this extraneous stuff goes to the side. So we can't attack Syria now. We can't do anything about Syria now. Likewise, Iran. If you have a process ongoing, everything else has to stop, including U.S. By the way, the United States had said that U.S. military action remained on the table under certain circumstances to prevent the Iranians. I'm not saying it would have happened. I am saying that that was what they said. But now what they say is that Israel will not be able to do it. Israel will be there.
Talk about Saudi Arabia a second on this.
Yeah, really important. It's funny because when they talk about who's opposed to the deal, most of the media talks about Israeli opposition to the deal. The Saudis are equally opposed. The Saudis and the Israelis have made common cause over this. There are Israelis in the Gulf. There may even be Israelis in Saudi Arabia. It depends on whose reports you believe. The conversation is what can we expect to accomplish together. I would caution against thinking that this is a Saudi-Israeli friendship pact, because there is no friendship there. The Saudis would be very happy to use the Israelis to get rid of the Iranian threat that threatens them more than it threatens anyone else. So it's not exactly that they have become friends. It is that the Saudis, in their own interest, are willing to let the Israelis, for example, overfly Saudi Arabia or whatever. They'll facilitate. On the other hand, the Saudis are still paying jihadis that would like to destroy Israel. You know, so it's not exactly sweetness and light. But the Saudis
They also want to destroy Saudi Arabia, it seems, at least the current government.
Yeah.
So it's a mixed bag. Michael?
I thought all along that one of the main reasons for this deal was to keep the Israelis at bay. In your opinion, will the Israelis play along? Will they play nice?
I would point out that the war against Iran has already started. Okay, we're not waiting for airplanes. The war has started. Cyber warfare goes on. It is said that the Stuxnet virus and the flame worm set back the Iranian program about 2 years, which is really all the Israelis expected ever to do with an airplane dropping a bomb. Things blow up in Iran with alarming regularity. Important things blow up all the time in Iran. Somebody is blowing up bits and pieces of Iran that have to do both with missile production and nuclear capabilities. People die precipitously in Iran. I think Iranian nuclear scientists had better make sure their insurance is paid up and not rely on Obamacare or anything like it, because they tend to drop dead. So the war has started. What people are talking about is an airplane flying over and dropping a bomb, and I'm not sure that at the end of the day is the best way to approach this problem. There are people who talk about dropping that bomb and not on a nuclear plant, but on the IRGC headquarters, to prove to the Iranian government that it's not invincible, to encourage the Iranian people to have an uprising. So lots of things are already happening, and I would suggest that more things will continue to happen in the future. I'm not expecting to see airplanes fly over Saudi Arabia to Iran anytime soon, but other things will happen. Good things will happen.
Last question.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you, how
firm do you think people like Senator Robert Menendez of New Jersey, who's been fairly, at least publicly speaking, very insistent on the need to hold Iran's feet to the fire, how consistent do you think he will be over these next 6 months?
He's great. He is great. Menendez started with Mark Kirk when Kirk was in the House and Menendez was in the House. And they were yin and yang on everything else except Iran, and they were partners on it. And I think Menendez believes it. I think he's willing to go toe-to-toe with the president. I think he's been entirely terrific. And I think he'll stay terrific. He has no incentive to go the other way. He has no reason to give that up. He's staked his place and well, okay. Schumer is not Menendez.
And Harry Reid.
Schumer is not Menendez. Harry Reid is not Menendez. If you ask the question about Senator Menendez, I think, you know, I just think he's great. Okay. He is my favorite Democrat for sure. Schumer and Reid both very much want to be defenders of a strong Israel. They want that. They have shown that over their careers. I wouldn't argue with either of them about how they feel about Israel. I think they believe in Israel. They believe in a secure Israel. Whether they are willing to continue to go against what the president wants, then you start to get into my career, my life. Do I want to stay, you know, senator? Do I, you know, what do I want to do? I don't know how tough they're going to be in the long run. I do not fault their motives, not for a minute. But whether they're prepared to stand up to what I think will be tremendous pressure from the White House, on Menendez, I would say yes. On Schumer and Reid, I would hope so. But that's, you know, I don't know.